Welcome to Upon Walton Farm. And it's a cold, wet February day here, and I could think of nothing better to warm us all up than a delicious bowl of potato leek soup. Today we're going to look at the original recipe and its mother recipe, which is Soupe Bonne Femme. And from that, we create two other soups, or potage. And the second one being Potage Parmentier, which is what most people have when they have potato leek soup. We will also recreate Louis Diat's famous recipe of crème vichyssoise glacée, or the cold version of potato leek soup. We will also look at gorgeous Louis XV antiques, and I'm going to show you how to warm up a room by using antiques from different periods, and how a kitchen can even be quite stunning and warm and cozy while combining some very formal antiques with rustic antiques from America, France, and Germany. I would also like to share with you some music of François Couperin, and I will be playing his Soeur Monique or Sister Monique, and I'm going to give you a little biographical information on him.
Let's start cooking. So we really are looking at three soups here out of one master recipe. And they are, the master recipe is Soupe Bonne Femme, which basically is potato and leeks and some water and some milk. It's a very simple recipe. But from that, we get the classic potato leek soup, the Potage Parmentier. From that, you can make a vichyssoise, a crème vichyssoise glacée. What that means is a vichyssoise with cream and glacé, meaning it's served cold. And so the first thing is, let's talk about leeks. So I love leeks. They're such a great vegetable. They have that subtle onion flavor. There's nothing quite like a leek. There's no other way to reproduce that flavor other than the leek. But the leek has to be treated specially because of the way it's grown and the way when it grows, how that happens. And that, what you will find is there's a lot of dirt and sand inside a leek. So what I want to show you is, it's very important. You're going to cut off the green bit for right now. We're only using this, we're not using much of the green because this soup, we want it to be a beautiful beau blanc, beautiful white, just pristine. And so I'm not using too much green because I don't want it to affect the color. But I want to show you this. I'm going to cut the leek in half and show you the dirt. This one's pretty clean, actually. But if you look, you can see right there, you see we have some mud and dirt, and we don't want that in the soup. So what you do, it is an extra step, there's no way around it, is you're going to chop up your leek and into small pieces, into a very small, I guess you could say, dice. And once that's done, I'm going to show you what to do. We put them in a bath of water. And what the water does is the sand and the dirt falls to the bottom. Okay? So I'm going to take all of these leeks and they're going to go into this wonderful bath of water that I have right here. Just a big bowl of cold water, simple, nothing fancy. Okay, it doesn't mean an extra bowl, but the taste of the leek is really well worth it. But what you want to do is you put your hands in and you want to move them around. Okay, you want to make sure the water gets all around them, and then you simply wait. Okay, that's it. And eventually let the water just come to a standstill, and the dirt is going to fall to the bottom. Now what's important is also, because the worst thing you want is when you're eating or when your guests are eating, you don't want to bite into a piece of sand or dirt. So what you do is when this is done, you strain it, okay, put it in a colander and wash it again. It is well worth it. And for such a simple recipe, you'll see the rest of the recipe. This is the hardest part of the recipe, to be honest with you, the most difficult. And it's done, okay? And so always wash the leeks twice, put them in a bowl of water and let them stand, you know, for I'd say at least 15 minutes and then go and rinse them again. Do not pour this into your colander. No, use, I'll show you, some type of strainer. And I use a very thin one, and so that the sand, you're not taking anything with it. And then you put this in the colander and then you rinse it, okay? So it's really quite easy. And now our moment for Louis XV, or Louis XV. This table I found actually here in the United States at a local importer of specifically French antiques. And I've probably had this piece now for about 12 years, and I've gotten some wonderful things from this gentleman who only gets the absolute best, and I hope we can have an episode with him. If you note here, we have our curved legs, very beautiful, and the ormolu, all on naturalistic themes, which is a highlight of the Louis XV period. Also, the beautifully inlaid top. The entire table is done in marquetry, and this is in king wood, and it's very beautiful. And here again, we have more naturalistic things, beautiful flowers, leaves, foliage, and at all four sides of the table, there's a bronze ormolu Bacchus. So this must have been used as a dining table at one point, or perhaps a sidebar. And what's interesting about this, the table was meant to expand. That's why I do think it was a dining room table. There are these leaves you pull out, and they all have holes in them, because it was important in this period that the pieces be convertible, that they really liked having furniture that could convert for different uses, and so you can make the table longer. Unfortunately, the leaves were lost and I don't have them. But it is a wonderful piece, and it's in the dining area of my kitchen, actually. And it really does work quite well. And we're going to talk about how to use elaborate pieces in a less formal setting, and for them still to work and be beautiful. So now that the leeks are all cleaned and ready to use, we're going to start in a good sized soup pot. This is a really nice copper pot, as you know. I love my copper, and it is lined with stainless steel. So 2 tablespoons of butter go in. And then we're going to lightly, but not brown, we're just gonna basically what you call sweat the onions and the leeks. So 1 medium onion, diced quite finely, okay? Because the highlight of the soup is the potato and the leek. The onion is just there for some added flavor, and it is in all versions of this recipe. Again, this is the start. This is the soup Bonne, Femme. And so that's going to go in. And then the leeks immediately. And so I've cleaned them thoroughly, and I've rinsed them and rinsed them. And you just put them all right in. I just take them right from the colander. It's been drained. My hands are scrupulously clean. It's funny, cooks, chefs, in the kitchen, all you do is wash your hands and wash your hands and wash your hands. But it's rather important. With the vegetables, it's not quite as, but when you're dealing with raw meats, absolutely. So then what I like to do, he doesn't say to do this. So this is Louis Diat. I consulted Julia Child. She doesn't say this either. It's butter, onions, and leeks. But always, in order to help them sweat, I do add this is probably about a quarter, it's a big pinch of salt. So maybe a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, maybe a little bit more. And so you put that in, and you're just gonna let them sit there, okay? You don't want them to brown. I'm going to return this to medium heat. In the meantime, I have my potatoes ready, and so we're just gonna give them a stir in the butter, and we're gonna cover it. And we're gonna set it aside, and it's gonna brown. Just let it do its job. There's really, once you add the salt, there's not much else to do. If you're worried about salt, absolutely omit it. I just think if salt in cooking has a very important function. And you can always use sea salt because it'll do the same thing. I'm using, actually, with the salt I always use is kosher salt. But you absolutely can use sea salt. What the salt does is it draws the flavor out of the food. It concentrates it. And so that's why you have to be careful with the amounts, but a little salt will go a long way. And again, like I said, you can use sea salt. So I'm gonna cover this. I love these lids. These are antique lids. Whenever I see one, I buy it because they're hard to find in this country. And if you look at it, it has a nice long handle. And they're designed so that you can just immediately, a chef in a big kitchen or a cook could easily just cover any pot when they needed to. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm just covering it. And we just want it to sweat. I would say 10 minutes on low, maybe 8. So check it. And so all I'm gonna do is switch it to my lower burner now that it's started. And we're gonna let them sit and sweat, and then I'll show you the next step. I'd like to talk about mixing periods, mixing styles, and how to pull a room together that contains both very primitive and yet very sophisticated pieces. Whereas we talked about this beautiful Louis XV table, and I'm using it in the dining area of my kitchen. And what I've selected to go with this, these were quite a find. They're beautiful, produced by the Pennsylvania Amish. They are all handmade with rush seats, and I found them years ago. So I don't know quite how old they are. I bet they are maybe from the 1930s or 40s. And the rush seats are just in wonderful condition. And what's very interesting, I thought the curved legs in particularly went very, very well with the Louis XV piece. And the curved leg, this is a little unusual. This gives this chair a very French look for it being American made. And especially with the spindles underneath, which are beautiful, and also they're great because they really, this is why these chairs are in such a great state of preservation. When you have chairs that have spindles or rails on them, they're going to last. And it's a really good sign of fine, really good workmanship. And behind it, this is more of a modern piece that was made to look old. And again, this is a Pennsylvania Dutch cabinet. And I use it to store, we call it the tea cabinet. It's filled with teas, and below are all of the jams. When putting things together, my mother actually liked to mix styles. She was not into early American, or really, the only American period she really liked was the 18th century. She liked to combine French, British, and she had a love of Japanese and Chinese porcelain. But what I've done in this room to help blend things is I've even brought in a farm implement. I found this old hay rake, and I cleaned it, attached it to the wall, and I think it looks really, really good with my painting of a cow. There's actually one property over from me. It's a cow farm. It's a dairy farm. And so I thought it was really fun because then I can hear them all the way. If I'm at the edge of my property, I could hear them. And this is another wonderful piece of American folk art in copper. I found this very inexpensively at a local antique store right down the block from me. Literally, I would say within 10 minutes of my home. And I just thought it fit perfectly for the countryside. And I love the copper. And I love to cook and even decorate with copper. I have all my wonderful copper cookware. And One thing I will say, I don't have that many old pieces of copper because, as you know, or if you don't, the antique pieces most likely will need to be retinned. So they're not very usable other than for decoration. And it really is a process to get a pan retinned. You literally have to send it away. There are very few people who redo it, and you might as well buy a brand new piece. So most of these pieces are modern, and they are for cooking, and they're lined with stainless steel. But they're beautiful nonetheless, and they're perfect for cooking. They conduct the heat perfectly, and if you need to cool something down quickly, they do the job. I also like to use fresh flowers that I've dried from my gardens, and these were from last year. We have some thistle and some hydrangeas. I have a lot of hydrangeas. I can't wait for you to see them. So to pull a room together, you really can use a lot of different periods and a lot of different styles, and it can work. Here we have American, French, antiques, and we have some German china in the cabinet. And really, it all just works wonderfully together. And you take these beautiful pieces that could seem so unbelievably formal, and you mix them and put them in a setting, and all of a sudden, the room is warm, cozy. It's not a museum. You live in it. And my grandmother used to say, if you have beautiful things, the entire point of them is to enjoy them and use them. Now we're ready for the potatoes. So if you see, these have become translucent, just a little bit and a little lump. You don't want to brown them again, okay? You don't want to brown this particular recipe. And so what I'm going to add is, this is roughly 4 to 5 potatoes. So all the recipes say 4 to 5 depending on the size of the potato, okay? So, you know, I would say these are 5, and I think that's a good number. So I'm going to add them to the leeks and the onions and the butter and stir them around. The next thing is where we now begin to decide, what do we want, okay? Do we want a simple soup Bonne Femme, or are we going to do the Potage Parmentier? Now, I am of course making a Potage Parmentier because I have to do a crème Vichyssoise glacée, okay? So, literally, the difference of the recipe is the amount of milk to water, or, and I'm gonna give you my little secret, chicken stock. So the recipe is, if you're going to leave it as soup Bonne Femme, it's 4 cups of water to 2 cups of milk later on. And it's fine. And that's the end of the soup. You let it boil, and it's surprisingly delicious. And I shouldn't say boil, you let it simmer slowly. But because I'm going a step forward beyond the milk, and I'm going to do the Potage Parmentier, I've adjusted everything, and so it's just the inverse. So what we have is, instead of 4 cups of water or stock, I'm putting 3 cups of chicken stock in, because I'm going to be adding 4 cups of milk later. And so the chicken stock goes in, simple, give it a stir, and that's it, okay? So what you do is you let this simmer for 30 to 40 minutes. So I'm gonna move it because, like, as you know, I'm cooking on an aga. I need to get it to come up to temperature. He recommends, of course, hot water. If you use water, if it was stock, it would be warm. And that's so that it immediately is gonna come to a boil, and then you can simmer it slowly. But that's assuming you're in a professional kitchen and you have a ton of help. So I didn't bother warming my stock in advance. So I'll just let it come to a simmer, and then I'm going to move it to the lower burner. So I'm starting on the simmering, and this is literally called, in aga terminology, the simmering burner. And then this is slightly lower. So this is, I should say, this is the boiling plate, this is the simmering plate, okay? And that's about it. And we just wait for 30 to 40 minutes and we'll come back and then we're going to add some milk and then we're going to show you how to take this recipe, the Soupe Femme, that is now becoming the Potage Parmentier, and we're going to make it also a Vichyssoise so that you really have 3 soups. But the master recipe is the Soupe Femme. The table is dressed. Not bad for a kitchen, right? But what a wonderful warm place to spend a rainy, cold day in February. The yellow was my inspiration. It was these yellow roses. They're just magnificent. And I couldn't resist. I grow yellow roses here, a hybrid tea called Kerrygold, and they're so difficult. Yellow, I read, is a difficult color to grow. These, of course, being from the market, they're really white roses that have been dyed. They put food coloring into the water they drink, and this is how you get these lovely colors. But most roses you buy, except for a red rose, they're all white that have been dyed. Also, what I picked up, I couldn't resist, was the pussy willows. They remind me so much of spring, and it's reminding me that spring is coming. And these gorgeous little flowers and branches, they are from the quince tree. And many of you might have heard of quince jam. You see it a lot on pâté spreads and charcuteries these days. And the quince tree grows rather big, and the quinces themselves are rather large, but they have these just beautiful little blossoms, and they brought spring right into me today. And having an at-home day, I just wanted to have a lot of fun. I wanted to think of the farm. I wanted to think of the outdoors when the sun is shining and everything is beautiful and I'm gardening. Here is a Herend rooster. I just thought that was really, really wonderful. And I'll talk about everything here. I brought out my big elk or stag breadboard, and I had to, even though we're not having port or something or fortified wine, but I had to bring a little stirrup cup. I just thought it was adorable. I thought it just, again, nature, bringing it in. The china I chose, this is really what I use every day in the kitchen. It's very strong. It's by Villeroy Boch, and they have been in business since 1748. These are modern, they're not antique, but I did get them quite some time ago. And each one has a different hunting scene on it. And these are taken from different French toile de Juiz, and they made a pattern out of it. Here we have Le Garde, and over here, a different scene. La Rencontre, the reencounter. And I hit a little tiny Herend owl here. I actually have an owl that lives in my barn. And then what's right next to him is so sweet. I found this one Christmas season in a jewelry store while I was shopping for gifts for people. And I just saw it and I said, oh, well, that's adorable. It's a salt and pepper. And the little birdhouses come off and you can season your food. I've done a lot of mixtures here. Between glass and crystal, I actually pulled out, on the left is Baccarat, and that is a pattern that's been, they don't make anymore. Baccarat actually used to have a service where they would reproduce old patterns for you. It was rather expensive, but they would do it. This is the Bergot pattern. And next to it, I just thought this was so country. I just thought it's completely different. It has a little green hue to it. Bring a little nature even into the glass. It's just glass. Frankly, I think I got them at a thrift store. I can't really remember. I've also selected for the flatware for today, or the cutlery, and I should probably call it cutlery, because most of it is very British. It's from Sheffield, England. And what I chose to do was to mix patterns, to just have fun today. That I wasn't going to do this highly uniform thing. I wasn't going to be in the mood to be Louis XIV, where everything has to match and everything has to be symmetrical. I thought, let's have fun. And so here, this beautiful ribbon pattern in silver. Sheffield is very well known in antique circles for its silver plate, but this is silver. And this beautiful ribbon pattern, which I just love. It's very reminiscent of one of my favorite silver makers in France, Audun Silver. They make a pattern very, very similar to it, and it's just gorgeous. Here, this pattern is hard to find in this country. It's called for the dinner fork, it's the Albany pattern. And for whatever reason, I've been only able to find it in England. I mean, you can find it online places, but you'll pay a mint for it. And so I thought, the handle to this, again, this is Sheffield, the knife, and I thought it actually looked very French and put it next to the teaspoon. These are American. These are really heavy, wonderful soup spoons in what is called, they're early American. I don't know the maker. They're really coin silver, and it's in a rat tail pattern, which is very French actually, and very 18th century, wherever you are, whether you're in England, France, America, it was very, very popular, even Eastern Europe. Another special thing I brought out, I thought this, you would think this is just some glass pitcher, right? No, this is a Baccarat pitcher that I actually found years ago when I was in grad school, and I found it in a Princeton consignment shop. I got it for next to nothing, and it is marked, and it's just beautiful. So I thought that would be lovely for the water. The butter knives, I love the pistol handles. I just think they're lovely. This is American, and this was made by Kirk-Stief, and they were the silver makers for Colonial Williamsburg, and this is one of the Williamsburg patterns. And this is called the Williamsburg shell. And, they're really, really beautifully made and very historically accurate. Unfortunately, Kirk-Stief is no longer in business. Reed and Barton, I believe, bought their molds, but I don't know if the pattern, Reed and Barton was reproducing this for a while, but I don't think they do anymore. I'll research it and just send me an email and let me know. So I think we're gonna have a gorgeous lunch. I think everyone's gonna be really happy. And this is one way how to make a really simple soup meal very, very special. And those roses are just stunning. I put them in a tureen because we're having soup, and I thought that worked really, really nice. So, yellow, it's a great color to cheer you up. And it's an easy color to work with. People think, oh, yellow, it's going to be garish, it's going to be too much. But really, if you see, you can tone it down. Like one of the things I did to the table is I put, really, it's a burlap runner. And then for the serviettes or the napkins, I chose a gingham. But I will say, these are embroidered at the end so beautifully. And again, these I got at Saint Balcon. These were next to nothing. I think they were €1 for like 4. It was ridiculous. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
So now we're ready to finish the Potage Parmentier. And the first thing he recommends is 2 tablespoons of butter. So I'm going to take a nice amount of butter here. And really, this is the texture. It's really more about texture. The butter gives it a nice finish. You can omit the butter and it won't be much different, because all it is, what it's doing is it's enriching this, and it does give a beautiful finish when it's on the palate. It really, I do agree with him. I use it. You can omit it if you're worried, because so far we really haven't gone that far. I have made this soup. I know for me, and I'm somebody who loves butter, I have made a version of this soup where I use skim milk, and then instead of the heavy whipping cream, I use half and half, and it's still very, very good. It's surprisingly good. That's how adaptable this recipe is. So now, to finish this, I am gonna put in 1 cup of heavy cream, okay? So again, this is
the Potage Parmentier. So we put in the cream and stir again. And you're going to want to put it and to bring it up to temperature. When we sit down to eat, I'll show you how I garnish it. Now, all that you need to do previously, before you added this, if you were going to do the crème vichyssoise glacée, is the soup that you've put aside. All you're going to do is you're going to add 1 cup of heavy cream after it's been chilled, actually, and then mix it together thoroughly and then taste it, because you might find that you will need more salt, and do it on your judgment, whether you're using regular salt, kosher salt, sea salt. You know, use your judgment. Do not use a colored salt. Do not use a pink salt. I know that's very popular right now, or black salt. No, because the presentation of this, it's the wonderful pale blanc, and then the addition of the green, because both Julia Child, Larousse, even going back to Caron, Escoffier, and Diat, all say to garnish it with chives. And the green against the white is very dramatic, which you'll see in a moment. Some wonderful rustic bread. I have a baguette and a breton, which I thought would be great with this, with some butter. And then I made a lovely salade of frisée, endive, and some apples. I love fresh apples in a salad. I just think it's really refreshing. And it's the perfect accompaniment to this meal. So first I'd like to show you the cold version, which is the Vichyssoise. I love these French porcelain crocs. They're really wonderful because if you have the room in your refrigerator, you can just line them up and get them ready, stick them in there, pull the tray out, and if you're having guests, you're ready to go. So here we have, and it's garnished with, beautifully, with chives. And again, I recommend tasting the seasoning. And now for the pièce de résistance, which I've been waiting for all day. And it's evening now, but this is really going to make me feel all warm and snuggly, just right, on a rainy, cold February day. It's exactly what I was thinking of when I woke up freezing under my blanket in this old stone house. And so I did bring out another really monumental piece of silver. This is Christophe, which is made in France, and it's the pearl pattern, which is similar to the pearl pattern that I have that in the Sheffield silver. And so I thought we'd combine, as we've been doing all day. We've had things from Germany, France, Hungary, America, and so now for this French dish, the perfect ladle. And so in a meal like this, I do prefer to serve it what we would call in here in America family style. Tip your bowl so that you don't have a mess everywhere, and it does work quite well. And then we're going to garnish with 2 chive stalks, which I think looks rather elegant, and I like to cross them in the plate. I think it looks rather nice. And put one on the lid. Très beau. Thank you for joining me today to have brightened a really gloomy day and have created such wonderful spaces and places to enjoy oneself and uplift the spirits. Thank you for visiting upon Walton Farm.